Alexander.
Good to see you. I was appreciating your mood board.
Did you like that?
Yeah, it was cool.
Oh man, are you in as good a mood as I am? I feel good about what's happening. Except for the unrest, but I feel slightly better, at least.
You know, one of the effects of being a reporter for such a significant part of my life has made me somewhat, I guess, emotionally disconnected at times from the events that I am bearing witness to.
Oh,
but
it
is certainly lucky or in need of spending hundreds of dollars more a month on therapy. You decide. But I am certainly intrigued by what's happening and heartened by the fact that some of it seems to be actually what was predicted in the first place, right? That while the polls didn't seem to capture the full divisions within the country, that the expectations that over time, these early mail-in ballots would come in and show a clear advantage for Vice President Biden. That certainly appears to be happening. So I take comfort when in things being somewhat predictable and measurable. Those things do make me happy.
Yes, I just feel like another one of the hurdles on the way to a nice green future, it was getting rid of Trump, and the next one will be pushing Biden as hard as we can. And you're here to talk to us about that. We've got one issue that progressive activists are already planning on pushing is obviously on the climate crisis. How would President Biden respond and lead on the health of our planet? Climate reporter Alex Kaufman is here with us right here, right there. Just across this screen from me to discuss. Alexander is a regular on this program and a reporter at HuffPost writing about climate change, environmental policy, and the politics of life on a warming planet. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
All right. What are your thoughts on this results of the election as it pertains to the climate crisis that we find ourselves in?
Well, I'm personally still in a wait and see mode. It does seem, at least right now, that Vice President Biden is ultimately going to prevail, and I do suspect that over time you are going to see certain. Did I lose you there for a second?
No, I'm here.
Okay, good. Sorry.
I think
sorry. The screen it showed you disappear from the screen. I was like, oh, I don't want to keep talking if she can't hear. Anyway, so I think things seem to be showing that Vice President Biden will likely be the next president. They also seem to be showing that there's going to be a Republican-controlled Senate. So that does tamp down a lot of possibilities, at least on the legislative front. Now,
I do not understand how Lindsey Graham could have won. He had like a 30% approval rating. I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I'm no expert in how these things end up working out, but I do have a pretty good understanding of how those individuals seem to push on climate and think about climate. So I think that there is reason.
You're a little frozen. Or are you there and I'm not there? I don't really know. This has been a weird day on.
That's okay. Can you hear me now?
On the StreamYard.
Am I coming through?
I don't know. Phil, do you know if he's there or if I'm there or if something happened? Sorry about that, Alexander.
That's okay.
Okay. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's windy somewhere and it's cutting in and out. But can you repeat? The original question was, what does a Joe Biden presidency mean for the climate crisis? You recently wrote about the importance of the Treasury for the climate in a Joe Biden presidency. Talk about that.
Sure. So the short of it is that a lot will depend on the makeup of the Senate, and a lot will depend on the ability of this president to find common ground, I think, with some Republicans on climate if he, they do in fact control the upper chamber. But there is a lot that he will be able to do on his own, just with his cabinet and through executive orders. I mean, he can really begin the rulemaking process to reverse some of the things that the Trump administration has done. And he can stack his cabinet with individuals who are committed to doing this, not just, people who are going to be thoughtful about it at the Environmental Protection Agency or the Department of the Interior, but actually a lot of these other economically critical cabinet seats, including the Treasury. And that is where you have a lot of climate activists looking now, hoping to get someone in there who is eager to use fiscal and monetary policy to affect decarbonization.
Who would these people be? What names are we on the listen for, and can we lobby for?
So, there are kind of three big names around the Treasury right now that are being discussed. One of them is Senator Warren. Now that is, that seems unlikely, and it seems unlikely partly because that would be a real provocation to Wall Street from
God forbid,
the Biden folks. It also, and as it is, the Democrats are not looking likely to recapture the Senate, and Massachusetts has a Republican governor. So at least in the short term, that Republican governor, Charlie Baker, would be able to fill Senator Warren's seat with a Republican of his choice, which is not particularly favorable to the party or to this incoming administration potentially. So there's another person that climate activists are very excited about, and that is a woman named Sarah Bloom Raskin, who was the deputy Treasury Secretary during Barack Obama's second term. Now, Ms. Raskin is a leading scholar of these things. She also served on the board of the Federal Reserve. And recently, she has been very outspoken about how the Treasury ought to be leveraging its power, both under the Dodd-Frank law to protect against systemic risk and to bring together all the other financial regulators within the government to push for, climate policies, that would minimize the risk that stranded assets from fossil fuels that no longer have value would pose, and to minimize the risk that these massive and mounting disasters that we're seeing as a result of warming also pose to the health of our financial system. And so she's been really outspoken. There's a third person.
Wait, hold on. How before we go to the third person, how is it that Warren would be a slap in the face to Wall Street, but they might better accept Sarah Bloom Raskin and the next person you're about to talk about?
Well, Sarah Bloom Raskin was in that role previously in the Treasury. Senator Warren has been outside of these things and has really built her career on seeking to rein in that kind of power of, the banks and investors. And, there's a deeper history there. I'm sure that you will find, some more right-leaning folks on Wall Street who will not be particularly pleased with a Raskin either. But, she is someone who is more seen as a technocrat in this space, I think, and someone who is less politicized just generally because of her career and because of where she spent it. She's been at the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. She is of this world, if that answers that.
Yeah, sure. And who's the next person we should be on the listen for?
Right, and so the other one is someone with very similar experience to Raskin, and she's Lael Brainerd, who is currently on the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. She served at the Treasury as well under Tim Geithner during Obama's first term, and she is someone who has also, to her credit, given speeches about the threat that climate change poses to the financial system, and called for increased use of monetary policy at the Fed to deal with this stuff. And so that is considerable, but you have a lot of folks in the kind of climate and progressive world that are much more skeptical of her. They say that, her record at Treasury wasn't great, and that could be blamed somewhat on who she worked for in Tim Geithner, but that, they're not particularly moved by her urgency on this issue. They also point to the fact that at the Fed, she voted for the rule change that made it easier to direct more money toward distressed fossil fuel companies in the midst of the oil crash that happened at the start of the pandemic. And so they look at something like that and they say, well, she took all of this fracking and oil and gas debt onto the government books. Is she really actually quite serious about this stuff?
Mm.
There are additional concerns outside of just climate ones. Her husband, for example, is the chairman and CEO of
He's the chairman and CEO of what?
the Asia Group, which is
Okay.
a consultancy, and they're concerned that that's a big conflict of interest, and that they would only really feel comfortable with her if he were to divest of that and step down from that position. I asked his company if he would do that if his wife were appointed to a position like this and confirmed, and they didn't comment. But
no comment. Well, the comment is, why should we? Trump doesn't do it. So your recent piece, Climate Progressives Eye Treasury as Key Post if Biden wins, in it you say that transitioning the global economy away from fossil fuels at the speed needed to keep warming in a relatively safe range requires unprecedented changes to the flow of private and public capital. Can you make that just break that down? And what does that look like on a tangible level? And then how can we do this and deal with the pandemic without, in a way that supports working people? What does that look like?
Well, there are a number of ways to really approach this issue, and there's some really low-hanging fruit around this that the Treasury could do pretty quickly and early on. Once somebody is confirmed to a position like this. And I will note this is stuff that you're not seeing Steven Mnuchin at the Treasury doing, as Steven Mnuchin takes every opportunity to debate whether climate risk is even something that can be taken seriously. So what could they actually do? Early on, they would really need to just do something that's like a literature review, essentially, of what powers they have and where money is flowing, and kind of bring all of the different regulators of the different financial agencies together to do that kind of assessment and just know what is available to them. That's kind of a first step. Beyond that, you're going to want to see them increase the rules on financial disclosure for big investors when it comes to climate risk. You're already starting to see this happen as a result of pressure that you're getting from activists and different groups like this. Bill McKibben and the Sierra Club and others have been really strong on what they've called the Stop the Money Pipeline campaign, which has been trying to pressure big banks and investors to disclose climate risk and to stop giving money to the dirtiest and riskiest of fossil fuel projects. And they have done a pretty effective job with that. And so you could just codify that into SEC regulation and make clear that this is something that they're going to do. Beyond that, you have central banks and financial regulators in Europe and elsewhere, like the Bank of England, like in the Netherlands, and now pretty soon at the European Central Bank, that are doing stress tests, climate stress tests, not dissimilar from what we saw after the recession, to test whether the banks that we were dealing with had the capital on hand to actually deal with the kind of systemic shocks that we saw in 2008 and 2009. Doing that kind of thing, but around different climate scenarios. That's just something that, as obvious as it should seem at a time when, half of our country is burning and the other, quarter of it is dealing
Drowning.
with, it's like, third dozenth hurricane of this year. That just isn't something that is happening right now. And so, I think it's important to kind of remember as context for this, particularly as we may have a Republican Senate that's going to entrench itself into some Republican orthodoxies should a Biden administration take power. We have to remember that right now the strategy is not to ignore and hope that a rainy day doesn't come. The strategy is just to eat the cost. We had another record year of billion-dollar disasters this year already, and it's not over. So, that should tell you a little bit about, I guess, the seriousness of what some call conservatism, and
Yeah, I
it
don't get
certainly
that.
is
They
not
don't like,
on the financial front.
they're redistributing the wealth to the wealthy. That's really what they're doing. They don't want to help. I don't understand how he could have won Louisiana after all of that. He did nothing to help those people. And there's like 5 hurricanes, like you said, and more coming. I don't get it. It doesn't add up to me, but I don't live down there. So maybe one of you can come on the show and explain it to me. If you're watching.
I don't live down there either, but I do think, people are really fearful, and people are really having a hard time with both the economic recession that we went into as a result of COVID, and the other horrors that we're facing. And so, absent a really strong counter alternative where you say we will absolutely guarantee you jobs and security and a safety net and money, not something that Biden has particularly promised. So, I'm not saying that there's a direct causal relationship between those things, but I definitely do think that there is some correlation between, the issue of the devil, who at least was able to send you a stimulus check with his name on it, and has made effort to boost the polluting industries that a lot of people in Louisiana work in, and that are not doing well and don't have a great long-term prognosis. But, if there's no viable alternative on the horizon, you go for the guy that's going to promise you the best immediate term results that you can bank on, and still feed your family. So, I find it confusing too, as somebody who reports on climate, but, I also understand that most people are not deeply entrenched in the science and the projections, and are just trying to figure out how to make it another week. And, I don't begrudge anyone making the calculation that they feel they need to in that situation.
Yeah, I get that. But also, like, the Green New Deal does promise them jobs. So if they remain entrenched in, just saying, no, I'm going to do this and fuck everyone else, which is to me what they're saying, that's unexcusable to me. Well, I'm going to get a lot of hate tweets after that. But I mean, really, I don't know. I get it. No, don't today quit your job because you want to save the whales. But, vote in a way. I think people are just afraid of change. They're afraid of any change.
Yeah. Well,
Know?
and I guess that's my point, right? I mean, it's hard to embrace change when, we live in a country where every aspect of life is commodified, and there is such a minuscule social safety net that when you are thrust into a period of uncertainty or insecurity, it could be the difference between feeding your kids or not. It could be a difference between a roof over your head or not, and so, I mean, even with the promise of the Green New Deal, look, I mean, I've talked to people in the industry before who say, yeah, look, I understand, I believe climate change is real. And, like, I'm excited by the prospect of solar and wind. And, I actually have solar panels on my house or something like that. But then they'll also say, look, I've gamed it out, and I don't make the same amount of money, installing solar panels as I do, working on an offshore rig, or it's just not, I have a union
But you get to
job
stay
out
home with your kids. How about that? You can
right.
help your wife with her role. I'm sorry, I'm a little punchy this morning. I know it's
No,
like
I
there's so many
understand.
different intersecting things that I don't know. I feel like there's no real excuse. I mean, I get it, but what they would use as an excuse and why, but like opportunities are being put forth where they, I don't know. The Green New Deal is like, we're not going to leave people behind,
Well,
and if
I
there's a
do.
social safety net, then that's not a problem. I don't get why people vote to be like, I prefer dog eat dog. Fuck everyone. I don't know. I think we're just coming off an election where so many people voted for Trump that it's unbelievable. Like, my liberal friends are like, how many? How is this possible that half the country literally is like a guy who puts kids in cages? Okay. It just doesn't make sense. People are questioning
Uh,
what it means to be an American. Sorry, I dragged you into this, Alexander. It's that
no,
day.
no, no,
It's that
no,
day.
no. It's good. It's cathartic for me too. I don't have therapy till next Tuesday,
Okay,
so
good. You know, I was a
but
former therapist, so catharsis is
really,
one of my favorite. Yeah, one of my favorite parts. But it was a little too depressing for me, so I just became an absurdist, and now here I am covering politics in the United States. It's perfectly reasonable career
ho-
trajectory.
hopefully you had at least the years of being a therapist gave you the skill set to have good coping mechanisms that you probably need
Oh
to do
yeah,
this
I'm
job
good. Yeah,
effectively
I'm
every
totally.
day.
I am fine. I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Alexander?
Well, I was going to say that you know, on this jobs front, you know, I think that there are two things to keep in mind, and you know, I'm not saying that these things either give me a great degree of comfort, but I think that they do help to understand these things a little bit better and to understand where things may be headed. You know, on the more hopeful end of things, you know, a part of the Green New Deal movement and a part of what was, you know, really pushed during the Inslee campaign as like, you know, I guess a more technocratic version of what the Green New Deal folks that were pushing, is that, you know, you really need to do significant work to roll back impediments to organizing a workplace that have been put in place over the past 40 years, you know, since the original New Deal was chipped away at. And that's really important. You know, I mean, that, you know, part of the calculus, I think, here for a fossil fuel worker or for a union representing fossil fuel workers is that, look, when we were getting these contracts for oil and gas and coal, you know, it was a different environment in which to organize. And, you know, part of the challenge of organizing a new industry is you're just not dealing with the same legal environment that is favorable to those things. And so creating a more favorable environment to unionizing will, I think, raise the wages and the security and the appeal of renewable energy jobs. And that's
Oh,
a really
great.
promising thing.
That
I
is a
think that
promising thing. Yeah.
and you know, a more you know, a more bitter pill to swallow, I think, maybe, you know, for some of the you know, more hardcore environmentalists watching this, is that, you know, I think you are going to see in any kind of compromise bill that would be able to make its way through a, you know, Congress that is half controlled by the Republicans, will be something that includes some of the decarbonization solutions that are disfavored by a lot of people on the climate left. You know, I think you're going to see a lot more of a push around things like carbon capture and sequestration technology. You know, I mean, this is already something that is necessary for industrializing or carbonizing some big industrial sources of CO2. You know, cement making is not something that is easily made renewable, and so carbon capture is a really important way to reduce those emissions. And if we are doing a big infrastructure build out, we're going to need a lot of cement. So that is an important thing to do. It's obviously much more controversial when you're talking about the potential for using these things to extend the lives of a gas-fired power plant or a coal-fired power plant. But, you know, the massive drop in the cost of building renewables and deploying batteries has really made those things ineffective either way. You know, I mean, adding carbon capture retrofits to a coal plant or a gas plant only makes it more expensive,
Mm.
you know. And so economics and the market in this case, I think, are going to favor renewables for electricity generation either way. But, you know, some of these things that Republicans have championed and have said are key to climate things. People who were once climate deniers and now no longer can will be the first to say, like, well, everyone is so certain that we have to take this certain route to decarbonization. And what about technological fixes? And so I think you could end up seeing some types of bills that, you know, give an extra boost to renewables, an extra boost to some of the natural solutions that people want to see. And there may be some areas of compromise that will make these things more palatable to Republican lawmakers, but B, also palatable to some of these Republican voters who would stand to benefit from, you know, perhaps not building an oil pipeline, but using those same skills to build, you know, a CO2 capture pipeline or doing retrofits on some type of polluting site. So there is hope ahead, I think.
I'm happy to hear that. Alexander Kaufman, reporter at HuffPost, writing about climate change, environmental policy, and the politics of life on a warming planet. The most recent piece, Climate Progressives Eye, Treasury as key post if Biden wins. A final thought, question, just because you happen to be here today on the day when the U.S. is officially not part of the Paris Climate Accord anymore. How fast can we get back in there? Is the if Biden wins, what's the road for? I mean, I guess that's not a quick question, but what's the road for international cooperation around these issues? If we're out of that, and as Biden has to move forward, what are we looking for on that front?
There's a fast answer and there's a longer answer. The fast answer is that he writes a letter and it takes about a month. It's really not that hard to rejoin, and that is certainly something that can and will happen. The longer answer
Dear
is that
everyone else, we're
right.
sorry. Can we please
We're
come
back?
back?
Yeah, Americans back, baby. No, but it's the longer answer is that restoring American credibility on this issue and restoring the diplomatic power that comes of having a fair degree of certainty around our ability to remain consistent with the goals that we say that we are going to enforce on our front. That's going to be much more challenging. And you've already seen China really come into to fill that power gap around climate. I would expect that they are going to continue to do that. For the United States to play a meaningful role there, I think there are a lot of things that a Biden administration would have to do to really show how serious the U.S. is going to be on this, and to show how permanently he can, entrench his climate policies, so that in 2024, should Democrats lose the White House, then you won't see what has happened over the past 4 years in terms of everything being thrown into the wood chipper.
Alexander Kaufman, thank you so much. It's very nice to have you here on the program. I feel like it's been a long time, but that could just be because of everything the country has gone through since the last time you were on.
Every week is a year.
Every week is a year. Alexander Kaufman, don't forget to follow him on Twitter at Alex C. Kaufman, Kauf1FMAN. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and enjoy. We'll be back next week with a lot of additional people. Who knows what might happen next week and over the weekend. Friday is like Trump's favorite news day. So we'll all be on the lookout. We definitely have Andrew Jones coming on next week. He's a political commentator. We have John Nichols, the national affairs correspondent from The Nation. Also from The Nation, we have Josh Holland coming on. So it's going to be a big day for a big week for contextualizing what in the Lord's name is going on. Don't miss it. I'm Julianna Forlano. Follow me on Twitter, and you can follow act.tv across platforms in case one platform decides they don't ever want to have any progressive talk on there anymore and kicks us off. You want to stay safe, be on all the different platforms. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next week.